Hi everybody, welcome to EzraHelps.com. I'm Ezra, cannabis consultant. I'm going to talk today about adult use cannabis in Massachusetts and who should apply for a license to sell or produce or manufacture or cultivate cannabis. So this is a fascinating topic because we've waited decades to pass this law, and now it's legal for anyone over 21 to purchase cannabis, to possess cannabis, to consume and cultivate cannabis. But where's all the shops? We don't have any pot shops yet. We don't have any places where you can buy it other than the medical marijuana dispensaries. So they're just unveiling an over 100-page document that details all of the regulations of who should apply for these LMEs, licensed marijuana establishments, and what the qualifications are, what the permit fees are, etc. So first off, it's one of the amazing aspects of it is that there's no fee for a cannabis business that's more than $600. So this is a very cheap entry point into the cannabis industry. If you can come up with $600, you can come up with the application fee to get a business going. And then there will be annual fees. So every business, roughly, it tops out at about $5,000 annually in terms of the fees. And then I'm going to go over just the various categories of what people can apply for. And I'll talk a little bit about the application process. And then tell you what I do in helping people get that across, getting their applications submitted, written, etc. So one of the main fee structures or application permits you can get is for a craft cultivator. So Massachusetts is really trying to address the issue of big marijuana, which is huge corporate entities coming in, getting all of the applications and going through all the licensing hoops and sort of taking their big corporate money and producing cannabis. Well, Massachusetts wants to address that and provide opportunities for small businesses and local business owners to participate. So the craft cultivator license is basically you could have multiple locations, so you can work with people. You can work with people who want to cultivate. You can work with people who want to manufacture. And you can process and produce your cannabis, your flower, your leaf, your edibles, etc. But you can't be a retail. And so there's a certain guidelines. There's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, these various tiers that dictate the size of your cooperative, and then how you can structure your business around that. So if you have some friends who know how to grow or want to produce edibles, you can be a craft cooperative and be a smaller entity. You can't be a retailer. So if you want to produce that, it's like being a small farm. You can imagine a small farmer, but then they bring their wares, they bring their veggies to market. And so that's what a craft cultivator does, similar to a brewery. A microbrewery might produce beer in a space and then deliver their beer to various bars. The next category, which I think is really interesting for a lot of people who want to enter the market, who may not have a lot of money or a lot of space to do it, is the micro business. So this is essentially a business in cannabis that has only one location that does everything. So you can cultivate, you can manufacture, meaning produce edibles, you can process your cannabis, you can produce concentrates to put in vape pens and things like that. And then you can also retail it right in that environment, but it has to be less than 5,000 square feet. So 5,000 square feet is pretty good for a business. You could produce many pounds of cannabis a month with 5,000 square feet. and sell that. So it's a lucrative possibility for small business owners. The fees are 50% less than the other larger application fees and licensing fees that accrue annually. Another fascinating business category for the cannabis industry is a transporter. So there's very strict laws, and I'm going to go into that in a minute. There's sort of a caveat to all of this. All the possibilities of what you can do in the business is that the regulations are incredibly strict. But one thing that I find interesting is this transporter license, which means every dispensary that produces or every cultivator that grows their cannabis has to get their cannabis from point A to point B. And they want to make sure that that's a secure process. So they're requiring and allowing businesses to form where if you have a van and you can create a secure environment in your van based on the regulations, put in a GPS system that is trackable, then you can have a business where you bring someone's marijuana to a retailer or from a testing laboratory or from a cultivator to a testing laboratory, for example, from a dispensary, one dispensary to another medical dispensary. So the transport license in some ways is the most efficient possibility. You could just have a single, man with a van and be a transporter in the industry. That's going to be a huge need. You could have an enormous factory churning out tens of thousands of pounds of cannabis, but if they don't have a transporter license, they're going to need somebody who can transport. So another category of licensing is manufacture, and this is going to be the category where you don't necessarily have to grow your own cannabis, but you have a license to manufacture it, meaning you can buy cannabis from a cultivator or a dispensary, a micro business even, a craft cooperative. You can buy it from them and then process it into whatever categories of products you'd like. It could be edibles, it could be patches, skin patches for pain, it could be balms or creams. And so the manufacturer license has a lot of interesting elements, and there's a lot of potential for creativity within that. And you can just let the prices go up and down, and people cultivate their own cannabis. They all have to test it. It has to be completely clean, tested by laboratories. So a manufacturer has a lot of leeway in terms of producing products based on what they can get from these cultivators. The next category is retail licensed, LME, licensed marijuana establishment. A retail is the most obvious scenario. This is just a shop that buys products from manufacturers, buys products from cultivators, buys products from craft cultivators, and they sell it in their storefront. So with a very small investment into a storefront, it could be a tiny little shop. If your parents have a corner store, that could be turned into, if the regulations are all in place for the area they have their business, that could be turned into a cannabis retail location. And a lot of people speculate that there will be a lot of growers producing huge amounts of cannabis, tens of thousands of pounds of cannabis in the state. And there may not be a ton of retailers. So if there's a small number of retailers and a huge amount of product, the price of the product goes down for purchasing at wholesale, and the retail environment is still high because there's demand, and so retailers may be doing really well. Very difficult to predict. Some states, when they've legalized, they've had a lack of cannabis, and so there's been too many retailers and not enough cannabis producers supplying the cannabis. So that's why I really encourage everyone who has any business sense and wants to get involved to try and get involved, because there will just be a wide spectrum of possibilities. The final one, which is interesting, but we already have it in place now, and that's testing labs. So if you have the equipment and the know-how, you can actually create a business where you test other people's cannabis products. So whether it's a pot brownie or a vape pen or just the flower that cultivators produce for for smoking, it all has to be tested before it's sold by a testing laboratory. So there are regulations in place, and you can pay the application fee and create your own testing lab. Some of the testing equipment, it does seem complicated, but with basic investments in this equipment, you can put yourself in a situation where you're just testing people's cannabis every day. It's like the transporter. It's something that has to happen in order for cultivators to sell their product and retailers to sell it to consumers. So a testing laboratory is a great business idea. I can imagine a transporter who has a testing laboratory in his van or her van. So there's all kinds of possibilities there. Now, the CCC, the Cannabis Control Commission, did decide to wait on cafes. They were going to do cannabis cafes. Seems really interesting. They thought, oh, you just can have a shop. People can go in, they can consume cannabis. But then they started to worry about people going into the shop, getting way too stoned, and then driving home. My argument to that is we have motorcycle bars. People drive their motorcycles to a bar, drink an unregulated amount of alcohol, and drive their motorcycles home, and we don't seem to have a problem with that. But they're waiting on that, so if you wanted to do a cafe, you may have to wait until 2019. So I just want to respond to Evie's. Hi, Evie. Great to see you again. Your question about a medical marijuana license. So there's a difference between a personal medical marijuana license and a licensed marijuana establishment. So a medical marijuana license is when you have a little card that says you can go to one of the dispensaries and purchase medical marijuana. What I'm generally talking about now is that because we've legalized cannabis for people 21 and older, we're now going to start seeing shops open. So you can get a license to run a whole shop. If you're over 21 in the state, you can do that without having a medical marijuana card or providing it for patients that are medical marijuana patients. So essentially, we're opening it up to anyone over 21. And I want to focus on something that's really important that makes me think about the neighborhoods that I taught in, where I taught Evie, who's joining us today, and that is neighborhoods that have been disproportionately affected by the drug war. This is something that the Cannabis Control Commission has focused on. They want people who have drug arrest records to apply for these laws. So if you've ever been busted for possessing marijuana, for selling marijuana, for trafficking marijuana, you can actually apply, and they will look at your application because they are trying to encourage these neighborhoods and the people affected by drug laws to, in some ways, correct the decades of disproportionate effect of these laws on neighborhoods. So if you have the one stipulation, the one caveat for the if you have a drug record is that you can't have sold it to minors. So if you ever were arrested selling marijuana to anyone under 18, then you can't apply for a license. But if you have, there's a couple categories. There are these rating categories of licenses. So there's something called a leadership rating that has a few categories under it, and something called economic priority. So I'll go into those briefly. The leadership rating refers to social justice. So if you want to create a marijuana dispensary or retail shop or cultivator cultivation center, you can actually prove to the commission that you are going to promote social justice. So if you are a team of people who have worked in disadvantaged neighborhoods, if you live in neighborhoods that have been disadvantaged, and you can prove to them that you work for social justice and you want to open a marijuana shop, you actually have a better chance of getting a license to operate that shop if you are focusing on social justice issues. This is helping the poor, helping with mental illness, helping with drug prevention, overdose, crime, things like that that affect disadvantaged neighborhoods. They also really want to encourage people to employ locally. So a lot of people are going to bring teams in. You know, if they have marijuana dispensaries in Colorado or California, those teams can take their money and bring their experts right into Massachusetts, plop them here, and open dispensaries. Well, Massachusetts is trying to encourage local people to get jobs and encourage dispensaries to hire people locally. So there is the leadership rating, this ability for applicants to get top priority and be looked at and get passed earlier so they can open their shop earlier, is if they're employing local people as well. The third one that I wanted to mention is that there is an eco-friendly option to be environmentally friendly or environmentally efficient in your shop. So a lot of the cultivation techniques in cannabis use tons of water, tons of electricity, tons of chemicals. So if you can prove to them that you are actually going to use solar panels, or you're going to use more efficient means to produce your cannabis, or if you have a transport company that's completely electric vehicles, for example, then they will prioritize your application, and you can have first dibs on getting approved. So that's an interesting thing. And the economic priority applicants are what I touched on before. Living in an area that has been disproportionately impacted by drug laws. So when we think about Lowell, Massachusetts, or Lawrence, or Holyoke, Massachusetts, Springfield, even some neighborhoods and towns that have been disproportionately affected by drug laws, they can open shops in those towns. They can hire people from those towns and from those areas and get priority in terms of their application. It's really good news. The final thing is when they're talking about hiring people. Here's the quote here: to create diversity and promote equity among minorities, women, veterans, people with disabilities, and people of all gender identities. So if you are in a wheelchair, if you're a veteran, if you're a minority, black or brown person, or a veteran, or women, the state encourages you to apply. If you were to apply for a marijuana license to sell marijuana, and you are a completely women-owned business working in an inner city, they would put you right at the top of the list for giving you the permits. So that's huge. And the reason why it's huge is because of what I'm going to say next, and that is the regulations to apply for any of these categories of license are immense. The amount of writing that has to occur. You have to write a business plan. You have to write operational procedures for every single aspect of your plan. They want to know how you're going to get the marijuana, what you're going to do with the marijuana, where it's going to be stored. They want to see security for your facility. They want to know who is going to be there, where'd you get your money. You have to write all of this out. And that is one of the services that I'm now providing with a colleague and some team of lawyers and accountants, is helping people write their applications, helping people understand the law, understand how to write a business plan and find real estate. There's so much, and I really encourage anyone who has a skill. If you have a skill in any field, you could probably apply it to cannabis. If you like the medical field, then there is a huge number of shops and dispensaries that are going to open that are going to need medical professionals to help people understand medical marijuana or understand how to use marijuana. If you like paperwork and being organized, every shop and every dispensary is going to have very strict bookkeeping procedures and rules. So whatever your skills are, now is the time to jump into the field, to contact me if you have questions about how you might get started, where you might set up shop, what is the best application for you, the best license to choose. So I'm going to wrap it up here. I'm going to head over to Ezra Helps on the Facebook page. If anybody else wants to join me over there and ask questions, remember you can reach out to me for consultation at EzraHelps.com, and I will see you later. Thanks for joining. Take care.